And welcome to another day of me riding around and talking about shit. Well, this time again, the driving and the talking are separate because my mic didn't have charge. So I decided to still go for the ride, and you didn't want to hear the huffing and puffing on my bike anyway. So I'm going to show you some of the beautiful countryside around me that I sometimes get to experience, probably once every 2 weeks, just to prepare for these rants. Today I want to talk about the closing of music stores. Thank you, Lennon Bailey, for giving me the idea. So, in the UK, 2 pretty big stores closed. I do not know why. KDH has a video on that. Didn't see it. Please go ahead and watch that. It was, I think, GAC and maybe Bax, something like that. Big stores, maybe even small chains, something like that. Why are these stores closing? I don't know. There's definitely a decline in people buying things. We talked about that when we talked about the decline of YouTube or guitar YouTube, and which I don't think is declining, but we're looking for new ideas and there aren't new ideas. So gear reviews, yes. Lessons, yes. But the new idea on the new video on pedal order or pedal platform amps or what does orange sound like, and all these conceptual informative videos have been made. Now we are in a world right now being 2025 June, where things are rather unstable. AI is knocking on our door to take our jobs away. You go online and you literally now, with Google's VO3, can't tell anymore what's real and what's not. It's actually impossible. Yeah, that's frightening. We have the US going pretty damn mental. We have a possible war in the Middle East. And, Europe isn't the most stable politically. Either fascism around the corner, blah, blah, blah. People are worried. When you're worried, you're not putting, money in your hobby. You're not buying gear. And I think the shops are noticing that. Now, are these shops closing because they can't compete with the pricing structure of the bigger boys? In the US, the bigger boys would, of course, be Guitar Center, Sounds, Musician's Friend, and Sweetwater, with Sweetwater probably being the upscale version of all of that. Sweetwater is a pretty good operation. They don't necessarily have the most budget-friendly gear. In Europe, which is where these shops closed, what's still around? Well, we have Gear for Music, which I'm working with. Nice people, don't quite know if their idea works out, but maybe their idea especially works out now because it's purely online, purely having some warehouses in the UK, I think Spain, somewhere in Germany, whatever, and then shipping from these warehouses, but they don't have shops. But they also don't have as low prices as some of the others. So sometimes the prices are a couple bucks more, but they are competitive, let's say, semi-competitive. In my neck of the woods, who do we have? We got Thomann, world's biggest music retailer. We got Session, who already bought Musikproduktiv, which some people might not know, and they let them operate independently as Musikproduktiv, which is a good idea. Because Session has not the best reputation in terms of customer service and all that stuff. Music store, big store in Cologne. It's where I started buying things. Great selection, but also a very dinosaur management in the sense of they haven't really necessarily discovered YouTube. They don't do affiliate marketing, so they are way behind the times. So how can anyone compete with a very much ahead of their time Thomann, who did online, not marketing, but online sales in the 90s when the internet was brand new, and just said, we're going to try this. And they bet on a very insecure horse, and that horse won. Nobody can be mad about that. Okay, they've just done things right. They invested in the right things. When I started working with Thomann and making my YouTube videos and getting some gear from them, the whole YouTube thing was very new, and they worked with 2 or 3 people, and I luckily was among them. Now they have their own affiliating market department that works with YouTubers on campaigns, on their in-house products. They're definitely ahead, or as ahead as Sweetwater, for example, in that sense. So I just had a chat with a smaller store that primarily sells guitars and basses, but not super small. Okay, also good selection. And they said, what can we do? How can we work together? And I said, well, do you have an affiliate program where I link to your store and then, get some percentage and for the sales? And they said, well, they don't even know if that's possible with their margins. And that's a problem. Any store that has more sales, like Thomann, that can offer affiliate programs to influencers, is going to have an easier time marketing their services than a shop that doesn't have the margin to do that. And of course, Thomann or Sweetwater, all the bigger shops that are doing okay, it's a spiral. They do okay, so they have the money to do more okay. They can go and learn more. They can employ AI systems. They can invest in more. And when you're struggling, you can't invest. You can't give away some of your margin, all that stuff. So that's probably what happened to those British stores. The sad thing is that this will eventually, it's already going there, kill all the actual locales. It will kill the small music shop. And I think eventually this will lead to a decline in people actually picking up an instrument. I really do, because going to the local music shop with your parents, buying your first instrument, getting good service and advice from the staff, walking out with what you needed, not what you didn't need, walking out with the knowledge I can go back and ask questions. All that is going away. The workshop tour at the local shop. We talked about that when we talked about going direct and companies not doing their workshop tours anymore, because the local distributor organized those workshops. I just talked to Sydney from Fender specialty brands like Jackson EVH, and they are doing that on their own dime now, organized by them. So some companies are trying to do that, but it happened in the local shop, so that wherever you were in whatever city, you could go to the local shop and get to see some of your heroes demonstrating some gear, doing some playthroughs, giving a workshop. That's all kind of going away. And I have a hunch that, I know for a fact actually, because I did address it, that's not in the best interest of a Hans Thomann. Thomann is not on the stock market. Thomann is privately owned by Hans Thomann himself. And this is a guy that grew up in his dad's shop, learning how to advise people on what to buy, knowing all the gear that was there by heart and all the features. He's one of us. He's a nerd. He loves the idea of the shop where people go and build memories and relationships with the shop. What Thomann is doing is not there to destroy that industry. But of course, because we live in a capitalist society, they can get better deals than the small shop. If you buy 1,000 guitars from Fender, you can get a better deal than when you buy 10 guitars from Fender. It just makes sense, right? So should Thomann then not take that deal? Should Thomann not price their stuff competitively. No, they're doing what a business is doing, trying to maximize the income while maintaining good service and customer service to their customers, and selection and all that. Should they not advertise as heavily? Well, again, that's what you do if you want to run a successful business. This isn't an evil conglomerate where people are used and then thrown away, and then the stockholders get the most money. Hans Thomann isn't in it for the money. He really just wants to have the best shop in the world, which is why right now in Treppendorf, which is this tiny little town in Bavaria, they're building a humongous, amazing, state-of-the-art shop. Why? Because people find themselves in Treppendorf to buy shit? No, he just, out of pride for what his dad built, wants to have the best possible shop. So, what's the solution? Now, in the US, we still have local shops. They're called Guitar Center. And there's also, of course, more, but Guitar Center is a brick and mortar operation, not primarily online. Sweetwater has one shop in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is bumfuck nowhere. So finding yourself there is pretty hard unless you're actually traveling there for that. Expanding with more locations, let's say buying small, struggling shops and turning them into Sweetwater operations, tough because simply of the size of the US. To have a footprint in all the major cities, that's $1 billion operation. It's just not gonna happen. In the UK, I don't know. I mean, we got Andertons who are around, doing okay. Probably not as okay as before Brexit. But because they could, all the UK shops could send stuff to the European mainland without any customs and shipping issues. And now with Brexit, there is customs, so things takes longer, it adds cost, which makes buying from these shops less enticing, meaning their whole customer base was kind of shrunk to UK only, which is still a good customer base, but not as big as, EU mainland. It really fucked them over. True. So, what could be done here in let's say Germany, which is where I am? Many small shops in cities cannot compete with a Thomann. It's just not gonna happen. And that's not because Thomann is evil. They're not. I think Hans Thomann really wants the nostalgia and the personal touch of a local shop. Now, what I would recommend to Thomann, if they were to see this, which I doubt, make some offers to some great shops that are struggling, that might be on the verge of having to close down, in key locations. Frankfurt, Berlin, Hamburg, Munich. Let's say start with 10. Start with 10 across the country. Now, they might be struggling, but the fact that they're still around means they survived in today's climate against Thomann and Session and the bigger ones. Meaning they got something to offer to their customers. However, they cannot have the price point. They simply cannot compete with price. But in selection, they just don't have the inventory. But what I would recommend is, let's say there's a small shop in Berlin, and they really specialize on violins and accordions, let's say. Well, buy that shop. Make it don't change the name. Don't change the staff. They're good staff. That's why they're still here. They've done a good job surviving against the big boys. But let them run their shop the way they used to, under their name. Maybe write a subsidiary of Thomann under the logo so that it's transparent. But let them do their thing. But now they have the inventory of Thomann back in Treppendorf in the warehouse. Now they have the price points that Thomann can offer. And let them continue their focus on what they're good at, violins and accordions, right? So if someone goes in and says, we'd be interested in a guitar, well, they would say, look, we could get that here so you can try it out. We can get that to your home. Maybe still offer some kind of advice or service. But in the end, saying anything we don't have here, you would have to actually get from Treppendorf, just like you would order it online. But you still can talk to someone and have a one-on-one with real people instead of doing it online without knowing what you're ordering if you're new to the field. And so in the same vein, there could be a shop in Cologne that focuses on, it's a cool shop, tattooed dudes, they're known for all the metal and heavy stuff. Well, you know what? Continue that. Stock them with the 7 and 8 string guitars, everything in black, and the high gain amps, and beginner kits and whatever. They could never have the selection that you could have in Treppendorf, absolutely not. But you could go there and have it still be what the shop was known to be good at. But now, first of all, those guys have a job that's more secure because they can stay in business. They can be competitive with pricing. They can be competitive with service, maybe a service that they cannot do right there. They could offer to send it to Treppendorf, right? Maybe they can do bulk shipments. There could be ways to do this. It's not about offering everything that Thomann has. All of a sudden, it doesn't turn into a synthesizer shop, right? But if they have a small synth department, this guy can now advise on certain things and say, well, we don't have that model here, but you know what, that's actually what I would buy. And of course, you can always send it back if you don't like it. But their core customers, the metal guys, they would come there and have better pricing, a whole service back end through Treppendorf. And in the end, I think it would lead to people building personal relationships, continuing personal relationships with these live action human beings until we're all killed by the robots and the AI. But I think it would be a win-win for at least the German landscape. These shops would keep existing. Thomann would sell a bit more. I don't think so little that it doesn't make sense. And again, money was never the driving factor for Hans Thomann. I think keeping the shops alive with the people in the shops, with the name and the reputation those shops had. Now that sounds stupid. Why would anyone do that? Well, he already has done it. He's bought a Guitar Point. Thomann didn't have anything used and vintage. Thomann doesn't deal in vintage instruments. Why now build a whole vintage department to compete with some of the stores that do it well? Well, Thomann bought Guitar Point in Frankfurt, who exclusively deal in vintage instruments, being the absolute specialists there. Now, Guitar Point didn't change the name. It wasn't Thomann Point. It wasn't Guitar Point, but Thomann, whatever. It's still run like it used to be run. They're in a new location. Now they have better funding, right? If they want to buy a burst for $300,000, well, there's funding for that. But Guitar Point is still run by the same people who now have better job stability, the whole back end of Thomann. If that can be done with Guitar Point, why can that not be done with a small shop in Munich. Why not 2 small shops in Munich? The shop that always specialized on electric guitar and the shop that specialized on pianos. But they're struggling. They can't compete with Thomann. They can't get the pricing. They might not even get some brands in because they're not relevant enough anymore. But they've survived this long and they've done such a good job that they deserve to stay around. And we need the local music shops. If it leads to a decline in people even picking up an instrument, that doesn't serve Thomann. Now investment. I have no idea. I'm not a businessman. I'm a guy that sits there and reviews instruments and has funny sweaters. Not today. Gear Street 4 sweater today. I mean, buying the location in a city and the inventory, I don't know. These shops are usually not big. Let's say $3 million, $2 million, $4 million. Let's say on average, maybe $3 million. And let's say you buy 10. Okay, that's 30 million. That is a shit ton of money. I'm going to argue that none of us will ever have that much money. Thomann builds additions to their warehouse for 40. That is within the scope of what Thomann could do. Reaching out to the community, showing that they care, keeping professionals in business, expanding their reach, expanding their network, and keeping the local shops alive to build memories for new musicians. I see it as a win-win for everyone. The only issue could be antitrust laws. I don't know if there's a way around that. So what does it mean? Well, no company can have a monopoly. In a way, Thomann already kind of has that. Sweetwater doesn't. There's healthy competition. In Germany, I mean, yeah, there is Session, there's Musikproduktiv, and there's Music Store. Those are the big ones. There are smaller guitar shops, good ones, high-end ones, right? In Berlin, there are, of course, around. And in Munich. But if Thomann, for example, went and bought Session and Music Store, which they probably could afford, well, they wouldn't be allowed to do that because then they would have a monopoly. If you have a monopoly, you can crank up your prices any way you want and nobody can do anything because you don't have competition. Competition is a good thing to keep prices healthy. So yes, on the one hand, if Thomann has stores everywhere, it could be a monopoly issue, an antitrust issue. However, as long as Session and Music Store and Produktiv and the other stores exist, there would still be healthy competition, right? And it's not like those guys hate each other. They actually don't. They talk all the time, and I know this because I've sat down and had coffee with some of them. So I think Thomann has the financial possibility to do this. And the way that I know Hans, I have a feeling the motivation and the nostalgia to do almost a moral obligation to do it, because that's where he came from. And I don't think he wants to see that dying, but he also cannot be less successful to give them a chance. There's 1,500 employees to take care of. So he also has a moral obligation to deliver for the people that he's hired. But I see that as an option out. And I see them as the only ones who actually could do that successfully and morally. Just an idea. It only fixes a small problem for 10 shops in, let's say, here in Germany. If you try to expand that over Europe, I mean, then of course, money becomes scarce and it can be an issue. The shops in the UK, I don't know, where are British people ordering? Could someone do that to small shops in the UK? I don't think Andertons could. Maybe Gear for Music, who are warehouse based, might want to move into some shops and actually have locations where people can really go in and get a coffee and hang and talk gear, or where the family goes in and says, we want like an electric piano, where do we start? We need that infrastructure. We can't just go to Amazon and Thomann and Sweetwater and Andertons and order everything online. You and me can do that because we know what we want. And I've got the videos, and you get interested, and okay, maybe you buy, but that's for the more experienced player. And also, it's fun to go to the shop and hang there for 3-4 hours with Bob and just, talk string gauges all day. Are we losing that? Would be sad. I think some of the big boys, not saying they have a responsibility, but they have an opportunity to keep the music scene alive. At the moment, we're turning it into buy for profit instead of for the love of the instrument. As I drink out of my Thomann mug, where it says music is our passion. I'm gonna be an ass, sorry Hans. Put your money where your mouth is. Show us that passion. I know that's hard because I've had conversations with Hans, and he is one of us. He's one of us, one of those nerds. So that was rough, but I mean it just made sense. Come on. Okay, food for thought. And gonna put animals at the end as always.